only 2 days ago.
Still not 100% sure.
That's it. That ain't art.
Are y'all good?
I don't know. It might be country art.
Look, we have extra microphones. You got two. See, they want you to talk extra. They give you 2 microphones.
I might have something to say.
Are y'all good to go?
Yes.
Yeah? Are y'all good to go? Great. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November State Board of Education meeting. It's great to see a lot of faces in the crowd today. We will start off with a moment of silence. Thank you. Before we begin this morning, I would like to welcome Dr. Gary Arnold to our board. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moore.
We're excited to have you. I know you bring a lot of wisdom and perspective to this board, and just thrilled that you're here and appreciate, I guess, what you got appointed last Friday, and here we are less than a week later for our first meeting. So thank you for taking the time to come
It's an honor to be
today.
on the team.
So in full transparency, I did warn Dr. Arnold that if he's going to fill in for Mr. Sutton, he needs to learn a lot about bonds. Because he's going to be our new resident expert. You got some big shoes to fill, but welcome. We're excited to have you to be part of the team.
Thank you, Dr. Oliva.
We're very excited. And with that, we have Ms. Hunter joining by Zoom, which means we have 9 members for the first time in a while. So glad for us all to be here today. The first part is always the best part of our day. We're going to start off with the 2024 Arkansas History Teacher of the Year.
We are delighted to present this award to Ms. Jessica
That just gave me one. So anyway, thank you all, and education truly changed my life for the better and opened so many doors, and so I'm super excited to be doing that for teenagers in my own district. And thank you to everyone here in education, and I appreciate you all. This is my husband, everybody. Nice to meet you all. All right, that's my superintendent. So I can stand right in the middle.
We're all friends.
And you're gonna send me a card, right? Yes. All right, everybody look up, okay? Thank you all so much. It's nice to meet all of you. Thank you. Hey, well, I have to, I'll have to be saving it a whole day, so. And if you guys are ever in Ozark, come on by. Come stop by Ozark High School. I love good guest speakers. So you can come in and talk about anything you want. I'll let you come on in. All right, thank you guys. Thank you guys. And then I think we got here.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you, Gail.
That was my fault.
That was amazing. I would love to hear more of all the experiences that she's had and can offer for her students. Up next, we have Adam Musto, the Director of Computer Science, to present a resolution recognizing Arkansas Computer Science Education Week. Ms. Musto?
First of all, thank you to the board and Secretary Oliva for considering this resolution, as we have for the past several years, that about second week of December. As you are aware, Arkansas is a leader in the nation in computer science. There was a recent report nationally that I know Secretary Oliva got to read where, of many highlights, we were one of 2 states in the country that have offered computer science in every high school across the state. And so I think it's just fitting that that happens right before we are considering this resolution and recognizing the great work of our teachers. Moving over to computer science from various content areas and trying that out. So I'll go ahead and read the resolution and take it to your consideration. So whereas the Arkansas State Board of Education believes that every student in Arkansas deserves a premier computer science and computing education that is suitable to his or her needs and can support his or her college and career aspirations. And the Arkansas State Board of Education supports the state in its efforts to remain a national leader in computer technology careers through the implementation of a vertically articulated, comprehensive computer science and computing education initiative designed to support appropriate technological growth in all Arkansas students. And whereas the Arkansas State Board of Education believes that Arkansas must provide its students with an education that will facilitate and advance the advance of useful technological skills and promote their role as digital natives. And whereas Ray Montague, an Arkansas native who was a national pioneer for women and women of color in engineering and computer sciences, created the first design of a U.S. naval ship using a computer, And whereas Grace Murray Hopper, one of the first females in the field of computer science, engineered new programming languages and pioneered standards for computer systems, which led the foundation for many advancements in computer science. And whereas the week of December 9th through 15th, 2024, in honor of Grace Hopper's birthday on December 9th, is nationally designated as Computer Science Week. In honor of both Grace Hopper and Dr. Ray Montague, we recognize the week of December 9th through 15th, 2024 as Arkansas Computer Science Education Week.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you for the work, and I know you have a big team behind you doing that work across the state.
Yes.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that today.
Thank you all.
Up next, I would like to introduce Alicia Price, who will be coming to recognize the many veterans and their spouses here in the department. Thank you, Ms. Price.
Oh gosh. Good morning, members of the board. Good morning, everybody. My name's Alicia Price. I'm one of the attorneys here at the department. I'm also a retired Army. I'm here to recognize all of my fellow brothers, sisters in arms, all the spouses, family that supported us along the way. November 11th is Veterans Day, as you all know. And if you are present here and would like to raise your hand or stand up when I call your name, feel free to do so. So, first off, we have Chris Abbott. Chris Abbott was an Army veteran. We have Ronnie Benjamin. He's former U.S. Air Force. David Burton. David Burton is U.S. Army retired and has a spouse, Trista Burton. Pamela Carlisle. She's U.S. Marine Corps retired. Carissa Castleberry. She is a spouse of Army veteran David Castleberry. Michelle Clark. Michelle is Air Force Reserves. Teresa Cooper. Teresa Cooper is a spouse of a veteran who served 2 tours. Christina Cuneo. Did I say that right? Yes. Awesome. United States Navy. Daryl Farmer. Daryl Farmer is former United States Army Reserves from 83 to 93. Bonita Flay. She is a spouse of a former Army military personnel. C.W. Gardenhire. They are former Army. Monte Harrison. They are also former Army. Ron Hibbs. Ron is former Arkansas National Guard from 87 to 94. Cheryl Houston. Cheryl is a spouse of an Army veteran. Michelle Johnson. Michelle is a spouse of an Army Reserve JAG Corps. John Kaminor. He is retired Army. Elisa Lambert. Elisa is former military Air Force from 81 to 85. Cindy Lancaster. Cindy is United States Air Force, 03 to 2012. She was in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. Onika Luster. She's a spouse of U.S. Army veteran. Denise McCoy. She is the spouse of a Vietnam War veteran, Army. Bridget Mitchell, or Brigetti, sorry, United States Air Force. Ashley Morris, U.S. Army. Bobby Olis. Bobby is former active duty Air Force from 90 to 93, and spouse is currently serving in the Army National Guard. Heather O'Shields. Heather is the spouse of a retired veteran. Felicia Parker. She is spouse of former military Marines. Alexander Pritchard. Her spouse is a veteran. Joe Reynolds. He's U.S. Marine Corps 01 to 06. Kim Vogt. She is the spouse of a veteran who served 2 tours. Wesley Wilkins, former U.S. Army. Navy? Oh. Go Army. Alethea Woodard Pittenger. I hope I didn't mess that up too bad. Army veteran, 14 years. Amanda Key, United States Air Force spouse. Pamela Anderson, spouse of U.S. Air Force as well. Leonard Bouillon, spouse of U.S. Air Force National Guard. Carlton Lawyer, U.S. Army retired. Tina Moore, spouse retired from the Army 22 years in the Army Reserves. Winfred Gates, Army 97 to 01. Kenneth Gishbricht, Air Force 02 to 08. Julie France Rowland, spouse Army National Guard. Sarah Lipsy, the spouse. Lynette Meyer, Air Force 08 to 2016. Katie Walton, spouse Navy. Brian Bilderback, that's Army. Michael Dewberry, Coast Guard, Army. Jay Kelly, Marine Corps. Mitchell Lewis, Army. John Lindsay, that's Navy. Heidi Migliori, spouse. Scott Plumley, Army. And Michael Reynolds, Navy. So I personally want to thank everybody who's my brother and sister in arms. You guys are awesome. We all had a great time, I'm sure. And I want to thank everybody who supports everyone in this room. Without you guys, we couldn't do it. So everybody, if you could, just give everybody a round of applause.
I know we have people exiting with busy days, but I truly want to thank you all for taking your time today to come. But more importantly, thank you for your service, for those that have served and the spouses that support those. It's so important, and we thank you so much. Secretary, did you want to make any comments?
Well,
We have most people leaving.
Oh, often as much as I can, like to brag about the talent that we have here working in our agency. And I think this morning being able to highlight those that have served, that have been dedicated to our nation, but also to improving the lives of students and student outcomes is a testament to the quality that we have in our agency of the employees that work and represent us. So we're just very proud of them and glad that we can do just a little bit to recognize them. As much as we want to do more, I think it's just very special and fitting that we take some time out of our busy days to thank them for their service and for what they do for our agency.
Absolutely, and amazing that there's so many in this agency that have served in all the different branches. So thank you all, and thank you to those who might not be here but might be listening. We truly appreciate you. With that, we will get started on our agenda. I don't believe there are any changes to the agenda. Is that correct? Okay. Yes.
We do have one. I think it was item 6
On the consent agenda?
on the consent item.
Okay.
That's been requested.
Okay.
for here. Was it number 6? I believe it was.
Yes.
It is number 6 on the consent agenda. She has requested state board review, so that will be on the agenda in the upcoming months.
Thank you. So when we get to the consent agenda, we'll make sure we pull item number 6. Thank you, Ms. James. With that, we will get started. We have the Lead Hill School District here to request a class size waiver. And
Good morning, Hope Arsham, Assistant Commissioner of Public School Accountability. And I do believe the superintendent is on the Zoom.
yes, I see Superintendent Ritchie.
Good.
here.
So the Lead Hill School District has presented a waiver for consideration of class size. That's standard 1-A.5. They are 1 over in their 4th grade classroom, putting them at 29 students where the current class size is 28 for 4th grade. So they are requesting a waiver due to inability to fill that spot at this, or to inability to hire an additional teacher. And the superintendent is available if you have questions for her.
Superintendent Ritchie, did you want to add anything before we ask questions to you?
No, I will say that we've gone up 2 more in 4th grade.
1 second. We can hear you very well. I don't know if we can
Yeah.
put.
How about now?
That's better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'll just get real close to my screen and
Yeah.
you can see my big face. No, we have added 2 more students to the 4th grade and lost 1 in 6th. You know, I'd given you a group of 4th through 6th grade numbers. So we did add 2 more to that group. It's a good thing, but it's a hard thing.
Board members, thank you. Ms. Ritchie, we'll have board members ask questions. I'll start to my left. Ms. Rowlands, questions?
I think we'd like to know how are you supporting the teacher in the classroom and the students when you've got the overage that you have?
Well, we have that band of grade levels go to 4 different teachers, and so it's more than 1 teacher. We did we added minutes to our school day, and so we have each teacher has an hour of prep instead of 40 minutes at this time, so they have time to work with each other, the teachers do, and to plan for those additional students.
Is your school board in support of this?
Yes, I did get their approval before asking, before sending the letter to you all.
Okay. Was that a unanimous support?
It was.
Okay. Was this a 1-year request?
Yes, just for the remainder of this year, and then we can make plans for the following year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wood,
Is there
questions?
any additional compensation being offered to this teacher?
Now, there are 4 teachers that these kids rotate through, so we have not offered additional money to them. Yeah.
Ms. Keener?
Good morning. You mentioned the high mobility of the population. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Is that industry-based or,
You know, we're just a sleepy little community. Right now, our numbers, we sit at about 352 kids right now, K-12. And this particular grade, fourth grade, at the end of last school year in May, had 22 students. And we have 31 students right now. So those kids could very well just leave, leave as quickly as they came. I'm not sure why the families moved in, and I'm not, I don't know the reasoning behind that. We don't have a lot of industry here. It's very small. We're on Bull Shoals Lake. I don't know if you know where that is, but we're north of Harrison. Very tiny. Probably the closest, biggest thing is Branson. We do occasionally have people move here to work in Branson, which is about 30 miles northwest as the crow flies. Takes about 40 minutes to get there. We have a big retirement community. Sometimes, at one time, we were considered a migrant school, so people came through to work in truck crops, but that's not as big anymore either, so.
Thank you. Well, is there a point that, what's the tipping point for hiring an additional teacher?
30, I believe 30 is the number
I'm so sorry. I've passed the waiver. At what point with this waiver, if your
I see what
population
you're
continues
saying.
to grow?
What would we do to, I think, we would like to reconfigure before, due to our size, we were overstaffed last year, and our 3-quarter average for last year was 343. And so we let go a high school teacher, an elementary teacher, and 3 classified staff members to try to get a rein on our numbers and being able to afford what we can do. I'm a former 6th grade teacher, so this is my 37th year in education. So back in the day, 36 and 37 was not an unusual number in a classroom for me, but so I know it's doable, and I know it could potentially be temporary. But if we do gain more this year, we may try to reconfigure how, it's 3 grade levels and 4 teachers. We may have to reconfigure how, maybe split one of the classes and reconfigure how we're working in, like our social studies course, I think is the one that's the odd one out.
Thank you.
I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Dr. Arnold, questions?
My questions have been asked, and thank you for your responses.
Thank you.
Mr. Bragg, questions? Mr. Anderson? Okay. I would like to ask Ms. Worsham a question of you. So here they're requesting a standard for accreditation waiver versus an Act 1240 waiver. Can you speak a little bit about the differences between those waivers and why to go down this path versus the other?
Yep, because this is a temporary fix, so it's a 1-year request for standards for accreditation class size due to being able to plan or inability to hire, things like that. That's why this waiver would go this direction. If it goes to Act 1240, I believe that's a 3-year request typically. So class size, we encourage schools or want schools to be able to remedy that issue yearly.
Okay.
Yep.
I know Mr. Wood asked about compensation. Is this waiving a requirement to compensate if there's additional students?
Yeah, the requirement to compensate for additional students is in the upper grade, so that starts in 5th grade,
Okay.
depending on how you're configured, or 7th grade if you're the way your schools are configured.
It's over that 150.
Correct.
Okay,
right.
so it doesn't
Yeah.
pertain
That
to
would not pertain to
elementary.
this group of students. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I'd like
Mr.
to ask a follow-up that I think puts me at risk of looking kind of ignorant, but I don't think I fully understand what the request is even. I see, I think 3 different grades listed here and 3 different class sizes, but then mentioned they rotate through 4 teachers. Can I just get a 2-minute explanation of
Sure.
what the request is?
Yeah, sure. So they have the standards for accreditation require by grade level certain numbers of ratios of students to teachers. So the 4th grade class is the one that's problematic for the school. They are at 29 when they submitted the waiver. They're at 31 now in that particular class. and the standards for accreditation require no more than 28. So even though they are rotating through different teachers throughout the day, it is still that group of students is over the required size of 28.
I see. If you don't mind me asking, what's the relevance of even telling us the 5th grade and the 6th grade situation?
I think that would be a question for the superintendent. That's
Okay.
just how they submitted the waiver.
I got you.
Yeah.
I can answer that. It's because, we oftentimes have especially in the elementary grades, we can make split classes, have a 3rd and 4th class combined together or a 4th and 5th grade combined. It just didn't, because of the numbers, it didn't make sense to try to split a class because the other 2 grades were bordering on too big as well. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I think I want to circle back to a question Ms. Keener asked. So for 31 right now, so you've had more students enter that grade since you put in this request. Could it grow to 35, or would they have to come back to us at some point if it got much larger?
So in granting the waiver, and I would defer to legal if I'm wrong in this, in granting the waiver, it does remove the requirement for class size.
Okay, so it could go up to 50. I mean,
Correct.
I imagine it won't. Ms. Ritchie, do you have a number, like you said, that if it went that large, you would have to really restaff?
Yeah, I think if it got that much bigger, I don't, I think the next change would probably come right after Christmas. That's when, people start moving again, is around Christmas time. I think if it got to 35-ish, we'd have to find a way to reconfigure, to maybe break out a group of them to take in their own, we would find a way to do it. I think it gets kind of big, and like I said, having taught large classes, it's not ideal, but it can be done.
Do these teachers, when they have the 4th grade, have any support from a paraprofessional or anyone else pulling in to intervene with students?
Not at this time. We did consider that, but the teachers felt like that they were handling it okay at this time. So, well, there are pairs in there, but they're one-to-one pairs. So there's some kids in there but there are one-to-ones that are in there. But they don't help in the, they might help other kids sometimes, but they're not in there just because of the numbers.
Okay. You mentioned that you added hours to the day. Are you all a 4-day school week?
No.
Okay.
We're 5.
Okay. Additional questions, board members? Any additional comments, Superintendent?
No, ma'am.
With that, if there's no more questions, the floor will be open for a motion.
I'm going to accept the request.
There's a motion by Mr. Bragg to accept the waiver request. Is there a second?
Second request.
A second by Mr. Henderson. Any comments or questions?
I have a comment. I'll oppose the waiver request just on the lack of additional compensation to the teachers. I think that the school district ought to pay teachers more when they have more kids. So I'd like to see that in these, when districts bring these requests to us.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Bragg to accept the waiver request. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ritchie.
Thank you.
Okay, up next we have a waiver request by the Osceola School District. Ms. Saraceni.
Good morning, State Board, Chair, Secretariat Leva. Can you hear me now? Okay. This morning, Osceola School District had a proposal for a waiver with several waivers that they were asking for, but they have put in new request, updated request, and the only waiver that they are asking for at this time is for licensure. It is standards 4-D.1 for licensure just for completing this school year. I know you have previous seen that they were asking for a 3 to 5 year waiver and several waivers, but Melissa Jackson, her team out of my unit, has gone in and worked with them, I guess probably about 3 times, and she was just there again on Friday and worked very closely with superintendent and the assistant superintendent. So we feel very comfortable about asking and supporting this waiver for just the remainder of this school year for licensure. Melissa and her team has gone in, and at this point in time, everyone that isn't licensed is on a route to or pathway to be licensed. We're also providing extra support, and we're working very closely. And the superintendent, Mr. Webster and Ms. Poole are here, and also is Melissa's Jacks with me.
Okay, thank you. We will open it up to you all, Mr. Webster, if you have any comments before we move into questions.
Good morning, Board. Again, my name is Charles Webster. I am the interim superintendent of the Oso School Board. We do understand the importance of this waiver, and we would like to have you all support so that we can complete this year.
Good morning, Toshiba Pugh, Assistant Superintendent of Osceola School District. We know that it is important that our students have the best opportunity at a great education, and we also understand that we are not unique to our situation of filling positions with certified teachers. That is a national pandemic, so to speak, of not having enough teachers that are certified in the classroom before students. We have filled positions as best we could. Some of those positions, unfortunately, were filled with those who are not certified, but we are impressing upon them the importance of moving towards certification and continuing to work toward their progress.
Thank you. Board members, questions? Ms. Rollins?
I think I'd like to just make a comment and congratulate you on the 6 new teachers that you have, and you've got 7 that are now in the process of becoming licensed. Can you talk a little bit, share a little bit about your partnership with the Crowley Ridge Co-op? I know you mentioned that in your materials, and I'm just curious about how are they helping you?
They are helping us with tutoring. They are mentoring our waiver teachers. They're coming in on a weekly basis. And we're also working with the Arkansas Northeast College as well. They're going to provide us with tutoring twice a week. Ms. Pugh has been working with that group, and I'm going to let her explain the process and what we've been doing with those 2 groups, and as far as Crowley Ridge is concerned and the Northeast College.
Ms. Sharon Colbert and her group from Crowley Ridge Cooperative has come in and helped our teachers through mentoring. They have worked with them, worked out a plan with them. Each teacher has a plan in place for the remainder of the year, and it talks about what they have now and how they're going to work toward certification. Also, Arkansas Northeastern College has agreed to help us with tutoring to help teachers pass the praxis test. They are partnering with Department of Ed through a grant, and they will be providing tutoring to our teachers as well as other school districts in our county. But with us, I've impressed upon them the importance of making sure that it fits within the teacher's schedule. We are a 4-day week. We do have a long day, so they have agreed on Monday, which is our non-scheduled day, to work with teachers through their tutoring process.
You mentioned the plan for the end of the year. Is there a certain time frame? Is there a required time frame that they complete their licensure by from the time they start? Or?
Several of our teachers are working with ATC, Arkansas Teacher Corps, and they have their own time frame through their program, but we have let teachers know that it is very important to continue their progress. At the beginning, we had some who had made no progress, and we have worked with them, we have met with them, we have explained to them the importance of that. We've also provided them with resources to help them toward their progress of being certified teachers.
Okay, thank you.
More questions, Mr. Henderson?
Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I do have a comment. You know, I know you guys been working really, really hard, and I'm really proud to see the progress that you have made.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Rollins, do you have more questions? Okay, Mr. Wood?
No questions, just a general comment on waivers in general. I renew my previous comments and sentiment of the board that I hope that Arkansas will transition to waivers attaching to individuals rather than school districts, because I think that it would make this process much more manageable and efficient, and it's just smarter in my opinion. So anyway.
Ms. Keener? Dr. Arnold?
I echo what Mr. Wood has said. I may have missed it, pardon me if I have, but when you speak of the 29 teachers of the 41 in training, did I miss what the balance of the total 41 is doing?
For clarification, are you speaking of the teachers who are not requesting a waiver for?
That must be what I missed. I was just looking at your answers to question 4, where it speaks of the 41 waiver teachers who have begun the year. It looks like 14 are in professional training and 15 in tutoring, and I was just curious about the other 12.
Some of them are, for lack of a better word, trying to make up their mind about what program they want to be a part of. They're exploring, looking at RPEP. They're also looking at ATC. I believe there are at least 3 of them who have mentioned a MAT program through a school.
Okay.
And we are really pushing for them to make a decision soon, because we want them to understand that not moving toward progress of certification could end their employment with Osceola School District.
Well, thank you for that recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Board members, questions? Okay, I do have some additional questions. Superintendent, at what point did you all move to a 4-day school week? And was that, I know a lot of districts come to us telling us that it was because of teacher recruitment and retention.
We moved to a 4-day week, basically because of the survey that we sent out to our parents, to our board members, and basically we decided on the board and pretty much a survey that we passed throughout the community.
Is this year your first year to do it?
This is our first year to be on a 4-day.
Did you see an uptick in teachers moving to apply for your district?
There were several new teachers this year applied because of the fact that we were on a 4-day schedule.
Okay, and I noticed I think at whatever point in time you wrote this report, there were some open positions. How many open positions do you have right now?
I think we have about 3 at the time. I think 3 open because we had 3 to resign last week.
Okay, is that normal to resign in the middle of the school year like that?
Personal reason, health reason.
Okay, so, and you are actively recruiting. Are you looking for individuals with license?
Yes, we are.
First?
Yes, we are.
Okay. We had a work session recently, in which case there was great concern for low-performing districts that moved to a 4-day week. What day do you take off?
We are off on Mondays.
Okay. And do you have a lot of students leaving on Fridays for sports?
Not very many. We just have football at this time.
Okay. I think that as I'm thinking about it, if you have these teachers without license moving towards a 4-day week, do you feel like they're fully supported to really reach the potential of their students with only 4 days, particularly with a number of teachers that don't have license?
We are in the process of offering our kids tutoring in the afternoon. We know that the day is long, and we're also in the process of partnership with our city to offer that tutoring program. And we're also looking at the possibility of offering a tutoring program on the Mondays as well.
That would be awesome. I would highly encourage that.
Yes.
Do you feel that those teachers without a license are fully receiving the support they need to be successful in the classroom?
Yes, we team those teachers up with a mentor, which are teachers that are licensed, that will support them. We also support them doing their PLCs. They have an opportunity to meet with them during the course of the week as well.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any additional questions?
Yeah, I do. You mentioned the mentors, Mark saw Northeastern. How many mentors do you have working with the teachers?
We are obligated to assign at least one mentor to each waiver teacher.
Okay.
And we do have enough, and if we do not have enough, then we reach out to our co-ops, which is Crawler Ridge, and we reach out to the State Department as well. But we do have enough at this time.
Gotcha. Is that mentoring taking place in Osceola, or is it taking place at the college?
Both places.
Okay.
And Ms. Pugh want to add one other thing as well.
Yes, ma'am. You asked about the teachers being supported in our 4-day week. What we tried to do with our master schedules on each campus was to maximize that time and put as much time into the classroom minutes as we could. Those classroom minutes also translate to collaboration time for teachers at grade levels or subject areas. So they have more time with people who are certified or who are seasoned in that grade level or department. Also, our building leaders play a big role in taking part in department meetings and meeting with teachers through collaborative efforts for planning and making the best decisions for our students.
Board members, additional questions?
I'll ask a question, and it's not directly about the 1240 waiver request. It's going to be about the 4-day not work week, but school week. Do you have any evidence that that is effective at helping students perform better in the classroom?
Again, this is our first year on the 4-day plan. We do not have the evidence as of right now, but we are collecting the data as the year goes on.
I look forward to the data you collect on that. I would like to review it when you collect it.
Okay.
When you made the decision to go to the 4-day week, what evidence, what studies did you rely on to decide that that would be better for your students?
One of the things that was I guess a profound decision to go to 4-day because of our neighbors that are going to 4 days, and we had to make this a competitive as far as recruitment of teachers. And most of our teachers were at the time thinking about moving to a school that are on that 4-day. That was one of the things that we thought about, and that constantly came up as we talked about a 4-day schedule.
Okay. How many school districts nearby went to a 4-day week?
1-3. We'll be the third in our county. Yes.
Did any of them make that decision based on academic outcomes for students? Do you know?
We don't know at this time.
You don't, what?
We don't know at this time how they made their decision.
Yeah. Well, I'm revealing my bias against 4-day weeks. I don't like it.
Yes.
But I invite anyone who does support it to bring evidence that it improves academic outcomes for students. Because I'm open-minded to reading that. I don't think,
Yes.
it doesn't make any sense to, this just layperson parent that 4 days is better for students. So I'm interested in evidence that it is better for students. Until then, I think that districts should lean heavy into returning to a traditional 5-day week for students.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Keener.
Yeah, who are the 2 neighbors that you mentioned went to 4-day weeks prior to you guys?
Amarillo and Rivercrest School District.
And then my other question is about the mentors. Often asking a licensed teacher to serve as a mentor is an additional piece of workload. Are you able to compensate them for their time or their efforts in the work that they do supporting the unlicensed teachers?
The mentorship that happens with our current licensed teachers with the non-licensed teacher is kind of an unofficial role that they play through their department meetings and grade level meetings. But we do have mentors assigned from the co-op and also through ATC for those who are a part of that program.
Additional questions, board members? Okay, Ms. Saraceni, I would like to ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you all, as you've done in districts before, did you all do an audit of the teachers? When was that process done?
Can I have Melissa Jacks
Awesome.
in my, because she was the one that took the team, and actually she was there on Friday again. We've
Okay.
been there 3 times, and I will let her explain. So I'd say that's a continuous process. We started back in October when they first came before the board and requested the original waiver, and I've been 3 times to Osceola. So it's a continuous process, auditing, and I will answer your question a little further about where those teachers that are unlicensed are, that are not in programs yet.
Yes.
Usually it's about a testing issue. And so that's where we're focusing some attention on helping them to pass that exam. And we've got a partnership we're working on with Arkansas Northeastern College to facilitate some tutoring for those teachers. And that's what Ms. Pugh was talking about, that they'll use some of the Mondays for that. And she's already spoken with them. That's going to be Mississippi County wide. So I think that, with some of our other districts that we've talked about, I know especially Mr. Henderson knows what I'm referring to, that we're going to have that extra help with them. Also, with the recruitment and retention, I'm really going to work with them on that registered apprenticeship, which I know some of you have heard about, and retaining those teachers through that process as well. So it's going to be an ongoing process and keeping our eye on it really well throughout the school year. And I just want to follow up, Melissa's team, when they go out, they actually have conversations with the teachers one-on-one. She works with Ms. Pugh and goes in during their planning period, and they actually counsel them. They have conversations to make sure that we're guiding them in the right path for licensure and meeting all those needs. And so when they do an audit, we look at master schedules. We actually go into classrooms, making sure who's teaching what and looking at what licensure needs that they need. So, I mean, it's very intense. I personally I've met all of the principals in the schools, and I've been to all the buildings and met the principals. I've been in classrooms at the middle school and talked to teachers there as well. The co-op has been helping with that to go into other classrooms and other members of my team, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you and your team, Ms. Jackson, Ms. Saraceni. I think without that, it would be very hard to understand where this waiver is. We know that our districts, our lowest performing districts, are generally the ones struggling to find teachers the most, and unfortunately are generally understaffed as far as what kind of support they can offer their teachers. So I appreciate the support that you all are giving them in that. Board members, any additional questions, comments? Ms. Saraceni, did you have any more comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. We'll open the floor for any additional comments or a motion. And this remind us it's a 1-year request for a waiver, and this is an Act 1240 waiver.
It is an Act 1240 waiver for the school year 24-25 that will end June 30th.
Okay.
And this is for the rule only on the licensure piece, not recess or anything else?
Nothing. All other waivers are off the table. The only waiver is 4-D.1, which is licensure.
Okay. I'll make the motion then that we approve the Osceola School District 1240 waiver.
There's a motion by Ms. Rollins to approve the waiver from Osceola School District. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Keener. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Secretary.
I just want to make a comment to Mr. Wood's point about the 4-day school week, since that was brought up, and I kind of reframed because that wasn't what the waiver request was on. But once again, there's another example where districts are making decisions about access to education for students because of what their neighbors are doing. And I really struggle with that. And I go back to, if we've learned anything from the pandemic, and we keep hearing these national phenomena terms like mitigating COVID learning loss. Well, I think that narrative needs to be shifted from not learning loss. These kids didn't lose learning. They lost access to being in front of a teacher. And when you have a school calendar with students that are persistently low performing and need access to high quality education and instruction, when we limited access, we closed schools for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And I'm looking at school calendars that are 150, 145 days. That's like saying we're going to implement these same COVID strategies every year for these students that need access to high quality education the most. And I really struggle with it. So I will echo Mr. Wood's comments that if we can find evidence, because maybe there are some communities that this is working well. And I keep going back to what I see in the research. The research is telling us that kids are learning when they go to school 4 days a week, but they would learn more if they went for 5. And the kids in the school districts that are doing right, and maybe Osceola is one of them, are still finding a way to get these kids in a classroom in front of a teacher on that 5th day. They're not just closed. We've got to make decisions on what's best for students and not for adults. So I look forward to continuing that conversation, Mr. Wood. I know that wasn't really what the waiver request was on, but I think it's something that's important to highlight, that if we're going to make sure our students are being on a successful path towards acceleration, then we need to make sure our schools are open and welcoming.
To your, one quick comment, to your point, just glanced at the letter grades of Osceola and Rivercrest. Forgive me, I missed the 3rd district they mentioned, but all of the schools in Rivercrest are D-rated and all of the schools in Osceola are D-rated. So that is of concern that they're now spending less time in front of a teacher. So.
I will also take a point. I looked up data after the Lead Hill superintendent left, and obviously that's not what we were talking about, but she said they added extra minutes, but at the expense of they're only doing 162 days this year. And our norm used to be 178. So you're adding time to the day with more students and taking away majority of the month of May.
And I think you'll also find that just even at a 178-day calendar, which is the standard expectation, that's still middle or lower of the pack nationally. Most school districts across the nation are at least 180 days and or more. And if there's anything we know about time on task, is that students that are persistently low performing need direct access to explicit or implicit systematic instruction as much as they can get it. So limiting those opportunities is probably going to help exacerbate the struggles for students, when we should be finding strategies to get them in front of teachers more to mitigate.
Thank you, Secretary. No, I mean, it's related. When districts are coming to us, particularly districts that are struggling, we can't just take one issue in a silo. We have to look at the broader issue of what's going on in their landscape.
Well, and I think any teacher understands that kids have a capacity for attention and focus, and once they've given all they can give, making them sit in front of you for an additional minute or additional minutes at the end of the day is not a good use of their time or the teachers.
This also lends to a discussion about block scheduling. It is similarly related in that an hour and a half of math 3 days a week instead of an hour of math 5 days a week. There's a question. I have questions about that effectiveness as well, but that.
I think we're continuing to send a message. Yes. What the Secretary is saying is we understand high quality instruction is important, and we want our districts to be figuring out the best way to serve their students.
In my opinion, I do know that obviously some school districts make the 4-day week schedule work, but in my opinion, particularly schools that are suffering and failing, I question that 1 day off. What are the kids doing? I mean, if they're failing, where are they at? Especially in areas that those efforts could be used to learning.
Well, and I hope it's okay. I go back to, if the expectation is 178 days, then a 4-day school week can go 178 days. They just need to go more weeks, right? Time on task matters. So just saying we're only going to go, our schedule is going to last us 36 weeks, but we're only going 150 days, I don't think that's acceptable.
With that, I think it's good that we can send a strong message to districts and to other districts across the state. With that, we will move on to item number 3. We have KIPP Delta. Ms. Worsman will be presenting a probation recommendation.
Good morning, Hope Worsham, Assistant Commissioner for Public School Accountability. I'm joined today by Mr. Matt Sewell, who's Assistant Commissioner for Federal Programs and Special Education, and Daryl Smith, Assistant Commissioner for Parental Involvement. So we bring to you today a request to place KIPP Delta schools on a probationary status for 2 standards for accreditation due to failure to meet longstanding, or for remaining in longstanding non-compliance for some special ed complaints, and for failure to provide all special ed services to their students. And do we have a clicker? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Thank you. So the division is we have determined that they have failed to satisfy the requirements under the settings for accreditation. The district's currently long-standing non-compliance from a complaint that was received by the special ed office previously, and Mr. Matt Sewell will talk you through the details of that. We are requesting that the district be placed on probationary status for 2 standards, 2F1 and 2F2, both pertaining to special education services and the continuum of services that must be offered to students under state and federal law. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Sewell and let him talk you through the details.
Good morning, Matt Sewell, Assistant Commissioner of Federal Programs. June 27, 2023, a complaint was filed against KIPP with 2 allegations. The 2 allegations were that the district failed to provide FAPE, specifically failed to provide educational services, and that the district failed to implement an IEP that would allow meaningful progress. Specifically, the IEP did not meet the medical needs of the student. On August the 25th, or August 26th of 2023, the complaint investigation was concluded. The final report concluded findings for both allegations and provided corrective actions for both allegations. The final report was provided to KIPP Executive Director James Boyd and Special Ed Director Charlotte Jones via certified mail on September 11, 2023. The corrective actions for conclusion 1 specified the following compensatory education services, the ones that are listed in the schedule there in your slide. Those are still not complete as of today. While there were some extenuating circumstances due to the parent becoming ill around January that did limit the district's ability to access the student, the district ultimately failed to provide the student with the compensatory education services required. The Office of Special Education does believe that the district could have avoided this by promptly beginning the services in the corrective action plan to avoid any delays in beginning those services. There were also large breaks in services from December 14th of 23 to February 1st of 24. And all related services came to a stop by April the 5th of 24, and for educational services by May 1st of 24, which led 5 months for related services, 4 months for educational services, at the time that the district had to complete those compensatory education services for that student. Corrective action 2 there, leadership training on the district's homebound policies and procedures that were developed as a result of a 21-22 corrective action plan that they had from a prior monitoring. This student was placed on homebound services. The leadership training was completed. However, since the student was placed on homebound services, according to DESE rules, in section 17 of the DESE Special Education Rules, you are to review that IEP every 90 days. We don't have any records that this occurred over the course of that year. The corrective actions for conclusion number 2 were that the district reconvene an IEP meeting to discuss training needed for the service providers. This required IEP meeting to discuss this training happened approximately 5 months after the due date of September 25th, 2023. But the entire conclusion, the entire corrective action was not completed until September 26th of 2024, so over a year from that date. In the second corrective action there, convene an IEP meeting every 60 days due to the nature of the student's medical condition. Should have happened 5 times, it happened twice over the course of the year. DESE Office of Special Education contacted the district multiple times over the course of a year for updates on progress of the corrective actions. Many of those contacts did include Executive Director James Boyd. Some of them included Managing Director Linda Murdoch, and all of them included Special Ed Director Charlotte Jones. All submissions from the district for the corrective actions were late, many were incomplete, and several of them still have not been completed. While it was the failure to complete this in a timely manner that led to this recommendation to place them in accredited probation, there are some other important information here that I think this board needs to have when considering this placement. During this corrective action time period, the Office of Special Education was made aware that in March of 24, this parent filed a due process hearing against the district. The district entered into a resolution agreement with the parent, and according to a response letter submitted by the district's attorney, this was not completed. The resolution agreement was not completed in a timely manner. On September 3rd of 24, another complaint investigation was filed. After that investigation was concluded, there are corrective actions that the district will need to adhere to as well, and this report was submitted to the district on November 2nd. Due to multiple concerns that have come into the department, the Office of Special Ed decided to do an on-site visit on October 2nd. During that visit, it was found that no related services were currently being provided to students who are IEP eligible. This is also one of the findings from the most recent complaint investigation. From the response letter submitted by the district's attorney, they now have related services personnel under contract. DESE has requested copies of those signed contracts to be submitted to the division no later than December 20th. As you guys probably know, compensatory education is a way that districts provide extra services and support when they've not provided them as they should in a child's IEP. This is designed to help make up for any educational deprivation that students may have experienced due to their disability. In this case, these services have not been provided and have led to the district being placed in longstanding noncompliance in the recommendation for probation. Knowing that the district began the year without related services for any IEP eligible student, which were still not being delivered on October 2nd, we suspect that there may be many more students who may be owed compensatory services as well. On October 30th, we sent a letter to the district requesting a list of the students who have missed any services, the types of services that they have missed, and the minutes owed by November 15th, 2024. So that's what's led to us being before you today to place the district, recommend placing the district in accredited probationary status.
Thank you. Ms. Worsham, at this point, do we hear from the district?
Yes,
Yes,
so
and
the district is here, I believe. They have, Mr. Schultz, is it 15 minutes of the district? 20? Sorry. They have 20 minutes to address the board.
Okay.
And they are here, sorry.
Okay. Superintendent Boyd. Good morning. Thank you for coming in. I'm to swear you in before you begin.
Okay.
If you would raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm not sure if you have our documents that we submitted to the state.
No, we don't.
Okay, I do apologize because we have some artifacts that we did want to share,
Okay.
including some email correspondence and other documents.
Do you need copies, maybe? We have not received any of this documentation from the district, so if you have something you want to share with the board, we can make copies and enter it in to this
Yes, sir.
conversation.
Artifacts as well, email correspondence that we have between,
Okay, they'll make copies, and if you want to get started on presentation, and then we can look at this.
okay.
Could you also move the mic closer to your mouth?
I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
apologize.
there
Yes,
you go.
Thank you. So I did want to share that we did have some issues with being compliant with this complaint. And I did understand the severity and the necessity of urgency for this situation. Unfortunately, other people did not, and I have made staffing changes because of that. The personnel at the school, the special ed personnel, as well as the school administrator, as well as my director of special ed, have all been transitioned out related to this situation and other situations in our special ed department. I do want to share that we have made several good faith efforts to work with this parent. Because of the needs of this child, the parent has limited our access to the child, only allowing us to work with the child 4 hours, which does not give us time for the compensatory hours and the academic hours and the physical and occupational therapy that the child has. I also have Ms. Kim Parks here from APSRC who would also verify, because she attended those special ed meetings with the parent who severely limited our access to the child for this time period.
So you're blaming them, sir?
I'm not blaming, no, sir.
You're blaming the parent?
No,
because
sir.
of your lack of services?
I'm not
That's what I
blaming the
just
parent.
heard.
I'm saying that we weren't given enough access to the child to provide all the hours we needed. In the time period that I became aware of it, we tried to work and give the parent a plan that could give all the hours, and the parent did not want to work with that plan. We're currently also working on having the child brought back to school, so now the child can receive all of the hours necessary.
So I'm assuming that's the initial child that filed the complaint, but you also received a second complaint in September of '24. I'm assuming that was a new incident and a different child, correct?
Same child.
So the parent filed 2 complaints, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask some questions?
Yes.
I have a lot. How many kids in your school have been identified for services?
For special ed services, we have over 100 special ed students, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And what's the amount of federal funding per student that you receive?
I apologize, I don't know that number.
Okay. Has there been any audits completed as it relates to the federal funding that you have received for any of these kids? Because it's my understanding, and let me make sure I have the facts correct, that there was a year where over 100 students didn't receive services, but yet federal dollars were given, correct?
I'm not aware of that situation, ma'am. What year was that?
Are you referring to the complaint?
Yes.
Yeah, that complaint is one specific student where the services haven't been provided to that student. What I was sharing about no related services, on October 2nd when our team went, there were currently no related services being provided at that time, which means
For the one student or for any student?
for any student, not for a calendar year though. From what we know at this point, no related services were in place at the start of this school year until October, while we were there on October 2nd. That's why we have asked for related services signed contracts, because their lawyer sent a letter saying that they do now have those in place, and we requested signed contracts as well as the list of students who have missed services, the type of services, and the time that they have missed since the beginning of school year.
Let me also add, just to clarify, when you went on the on-site, there was no evidence of related services for this school year. So school started in August. So we know for at least 3 months, none of those students were being served. And because we weren't there until October, who knows how long into the past school year this practice has been in place? Is that a fair question?
Correct.
And no new students were identified, so there are more than likely 20 to 25%, I would assume, students that have not been identified and therefore are not receiving services.
Can you walk us through what your policies, protocols look like for identifying a student? So at the beginning of this year, kid starts in August. What do you do to identify them as having special needs or needing of services?
Yes, ma'am. We still had a contractor who was providing those testing for students, so students were still being identified. The process is usually when students enter kindergarten, we take anecdotal data from both the teacher and any information that we get from the parent. You have your CST, your child study team, where you actually look and identify those things. We have a contractor named Lori Ginn who does the testing. Once those things are identified, our SPED manager conducts a meeting with the parent and the LEA and the teachers to ensure that the student will receive those necessary services.
So how many for the current school year have you identified in need of services?
I apologize, I don't have that number for this year.
You mentioned anecdotal records. And this may not be a question for you, but charter schools are also required to perform dyslexia screeners as well, correct?
Yes, ma'am, we do those screeners.
Okay, so it was more than anecdotal, okay.
Yes, ma'am. So
Thank you.
when I say anecdotal, I mean like teacher notes or student work surveys, but we also do DIBELS and we do our screeners as well. Yes, ma'am.
Is iReady one
Yes,
of
ma'am.
them?
We do iReady, DIBELS, and NWEA.
So what services is the school currently providing?
The school is providing occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech language.
Okay. Have you guys had any audits over the last year as it relates to special education?
We have an audit coming up in November 20th to 22nd.
Okay. But has there been any for 23, 24?
I didn't hear your last question.
No, was there one conducted for 23, 24?
No, we're planning on on-site monitoring of the programmatic and fiscal special education operations in mid-November. I believe the date that he said was correct.
You mentioned you transitioned out some staff. Were they the ones that were responsible for?
Yes, sir.
Were they in place in August when school started?
When this school year started? No, sir.
Okay.
Board member, Mr. Henderson, do you have any questions?
Not this time.
Ms. Woods, do you have further questions?
Just a couple more. What has been the communication with parents of students with services over the last year?
The issue related services started this school year.
Okay.
There was no problems during the 23-24 school year. The problem was in the Delta area, we have very limited access to related services providers, and there were some issues with one specific related services provider. That related service provider was part of the largest related service provider in the area, and so in our process of having conversations with that related services provider about things that were not being done as far as documentation and things of that nature, we could not come to a agreement on how we were going to move forward, and so that started the process of us having to do requests for proposals for another related service provider. Unfortunately, that took way longer than it should have, and that was how we ended up starting the school year without a related services provider.
But if there wasn't an issue until the beginning of this year, then why did you let go all of those staff members?
No, ma'am. It was the two issues were the staff members did not have the appropriate sense of urgency to get this corrective action taken care of, not just for this student, but all the students we serve. There were no systems in place to document the services we were providing students. The quality of what they were providing was not what I would feel was appropriate if it was my child, so it certainly would not be appropriate for other people's children. If I wouldn't allow it, then I won't. If it was not adequate, and it was certainly not of the standards that we uphold for KIPP.
So what communications then were made to parents, or what communications have been made to parents currently?
The current communication to parents has been that the parents who have students who are supposed to receive related services have been informed that we did not have a related services provider. We have a tracker that shows the number of hours students are supposed to have and how many hours they've missed, and we are actively working with parents to inform them of how we're going to work now that we have related services providers on giving them those hours that they've missed.
Have you also gone back to all of those students, though, from the last year to evaluate where they are in terms of their IEP?
That is a plan, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where are you at in that plan? Because we're in November.
I am not sure where we are with that plan. The biggest issue has really been with our related services, not the actual IEPs, but we have been working, we have a new special ed manager, and we have been working to make sure that not only the 24-25, but previous year IEPs are reflective of the services that students should be receiving and the quality of the accommodations that they need to be successful.
I just want to make a comment to that point, that when a parent comes to the school to sign an individualized education plan, that's basically a contract between the school and that parent, which you have been violating. When you get your charter from this state, that's a contract with the state. Your contract with our state says you're going to provide these services. You're breaking the state contract. So today, we're talking about due process and support for students in probationary accreditation status, but we need to take this charter to our charter authoring panel, because I'm a big proponent of school choice. I think I've been very consistent and clear for that. But choice has to be of quality, and I am questioning the quality of your charter school and why you're allowed to have a charter agreement with our state that you just blatantly violate, just like you're blatantly violating your parents' contract that they're gonna get services with you.
I think my biggest issue with this is that kids are entitled to a free and appropriate public education, and we have failed them.
I agree.
And I've had 2 days to stew on this, and I've gotten really mad and then like brought myself back down, but that is the biggest disappointment here.
And let me be clear when I say that I don't want to make excuses. I agree with you. That is my own personal frustration. I am frustrated that we have not given our students what they deserve. We have not given that community what it deserves. But I also stand here saying I need the opportunity to fix those things, to make those things happen, because I did not come here to fail this community. I want to get these things
How long?
better.
What's that timeline? A month, 6 months, 10 years? What's the timeline? We've been told that you haven't provided any related services this school year. It's November, the first 9 weeks is over, and you're saying your staff's not acting with urgency. Are you acting with urgency? Because there's ways. Have you called your co-ops? Have you called neighboring districts? Have you figured out how to get contracts in place? There are strategies. Yes. Our office will help you with those strategies, because at the end of the day, the students that are the most vulnerable and need the most supports are being denied. Like, I struggle that this is allowed to happen, and I know this board is going to consider taking action, and I'll let you continue that.
Let me check down here, board members' questions.
I would highlight that it has been 1.5 years since the complaint was first received. And we're talking about lack of urgency in your staff. I mean, the complaint should have been the heart attack, the earthquake that woke everyone up. Agreed. And it seems as though it was not. Agreed. And I respectfully, and not personally, but I guess I'm kind of talking about the leadership of the district, so I guess I'm kind of talking about you.
Me, yes.
But, you know, this should have been the moment that you realized that staff wasn't treating students appropriately, not the end of, not a year later.
Agreed. You
gave ineffective staff a year to waste of these kids' educational opportunities. And I think that needs to be the standard in Arkansas, that when complaints are received, that major changes will happen then, that we won't make excuses for people. Mm-hmm. And there is too much on the line. There is too much to fix to just allow ineffective people to continue being ineffective. And I'm very disappointed that it took a year to make the changes necessary after these complaints were received.
And I struggle with the implication that the staff was ineffective, because the staff is only as effective as their leaders.
Agreed.
And I'm concerned that in your area you struggle to, we know that there is a lack of qualified educators, so I assume there's going to be a lack of qualified staff that you're replacing.
Special ed educators,
right,
yes.
Exactly. So how can you, what are you doing to address your leadership style so these new hires don't fall into the same pattern of ineffective services that the previous staff had? Because, again, I think this comes back to your leadership. So tell us what changes you're making in your role.
The two biggest changes that we're making is we're creating systems that were not appropriate tracking systems. So when the specific leaders are reporting in on what things are going on in their departments, without having appropriate tracking, we don't have a way of verifying that. So we've created those systems. We've also improved our work with APSRC to provide training and services to our managers. We've also changed our staffing model as far as supervision. So we previously had a director of special ed. We now have a manager. We're going to have a manager in both of our communities, the Brooks, the Blytheville and the Helena community, someone who's actually going to be able to go in classrooms and support teachers as opposed to a director who's more of an administrative person. So we're now going to have managers who actually work in schools with special ed teachers. We've been working diligently on trying to hire more special ed teachers. We have a critical need bonus that we provide to teachers who wish to teach special ed. And we also are providing tuition support to teachers who decide to get special ed certification or to get a degree in special ed as well.
So putting things in place that should have been there in the first place.
Agreed.
Tell me, how are you building your personal capacity to be a leader?
I have a background in special ed. I started my career as a special ed teacher. I served in Hillsborough County, Florida. I was an administrator at a special ed school, so I have a background and I understand special ed. I think for me, the issue is becoming a lot more participatory, which is what I've done now, where actually I'm sitting in meetings. I meet with Ms. Parks on a regular basis. We have a consultant who's working with our special ed department as well, because we have a lot of special teachers who are working on their certification in special ed but don't have it. So we actually have a consultant who's working out, training our special ed manager, who's helping the manager actually create those systems and those trackers to make sure that we're providing those services. I also have been working with the specific related services providers to make sure that we can actually broaden the numbers of related services providers that we currently have on contract. I'm working on contracting more related services providers so we can catch up those students who have missed those hours, so we can catch those students up and it won't be a burden on them so they end up losing recess every day because they're trying to make up hours. We're working on ways to make sure that that does not happen by having more providers.
I truly hope that you have never taken a recess from a child because of your lack of ability to lead yourself.
That's what I'm saying. I'm making sure we don't, because I know sometimes when you get in a situation where you're trying to make up, the first thing adults want to do is say, well, pull them out of recess. So I'm saying we're providing more providers so we don't get to that point where we're trying to figure out the time during the school day. If we have more providers, then there are more options on the times that the providers can work with those students. So we don't use that as a, that's why I apologize for the way I said it, but so we don't take students out of recess.
Tell me more about the contractor. Who is it and how much are you paying them?
The three contractors, they all make between $90 and $100 an hour for the services, and then I think they charge $100 to $150 for the initial evaluations. I can pull those contracts up. And one of the things we also made sure that we included, because again, unfortunately something that we were not doing an effective job on, is ensuring that our new related services providers are actually available for IEP meetings, because a lot of times what I noticed was they would provide reports, but using that jargon doesn't always fit to what a parent understands, so making sure they're actually, so all the way from the provider who does the evaluations to the related services providers, making sure they're available for IEP meetings so they can explain progress and not just submit a report, but actually be available to answer questions for the parent. And those are things that we wrote into the contracts with the related services providers, that they would be available for those meetings.
I appreciate your response. I suppose I'm not convinced that change is on the horizon.
A comment?
Dr. Arnold, question?
Yes. It seems to me that over the timeline of this case, certain fatal flaws have surfaced, they being non-compliance, lack of follow-through, missed deadlines. But another one struck me today as I read your memo, or the memo that was distributed rather in real time. Page 2, paragraph 2, line 4, the lack of DESE having a streamlined monitoring system, ... just seems to be another illustration of blaming, and that enters into the fray as well. So my rhetorical question to the board and the room, is probation a strong enough response to this?
Well, if I could, sir, I think the purpose of that comment was the fact that it was more related to the person who was in that role not keeping appropriate records, and so not having a way that those records were reported to DESE, like if there was a specific repository where that person should have been documenting, so that when that person was transitioned out, we didn't have to archive through that person's emails to find the documentation, as opposed to if there was an actual place that person was supposed to have been documenting those things to the state, if that makes sense. Because what we ended up having to do is when that person was transitioned out, we had to go through and archive that person's emails to get the artifacts of what had been done, as opposed to if there was a tracker that the state had provided where that person was supposed to have been putting that information, which we now created our own.
How long has your school been here?
Since 2002.
So have there been systems in place and they just fell off in 2023?
No, ma'am, there were not effective systems in place.
So we're talking 20 years of lack of systems?
Well, it wasn't a lack of systems. It was as our special ed population grew and there were not enough people there who could address the needs as the population grew. The systems that they were using for a smaller denominator were not as effective when the denominator got larger. So I'm used to larger systems where these processes are already in place, and so whoever transitioned into that role, they just continue to use the systems. But previously what was happening is whoever had a system, that was a system they used. When that person transitioned out, the next person created their own system, as opposed to there's a system that the entire organization is using. It was more dependent on the individual and not the organization.
So how many special ed people have you had in place since the beginning?
Just in the time I've been there, which is 18 months, I had one special ed director, and now I have a manager, and I have a vacancy for another manager. Because as I shared, because our schools are in 2 different communities, I didn't feel it was effective to have one director that was in one city, as opposed to having 2 managers who were actually in both communities supporting the teachers and the students in those communities.
So 2 over 18 months, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, just making sure.
Dr. Boyd, me being from that area and having an understanding of the dynamics, trying to have a very broad thought process of this whole issue here. Explain to me, I guess, with the KIPP structure, I know, what position does the board have with this as far as the communication piece? And also, I know we have KIPP Helena that used to be a very strong bridge and communication gap there. Because I guess what I'm trying to determine here is, as good as we all are individually, what kind of support do you have? Because what I'm hearing is a lot of the systematic processes that we failed at, it's all looking like it's on you. So what support do you have, or have you had with this the last 18 months, with the board and Helena structure?
My board is extremely supportive. I think, to be quite transparent, I think one of the issues is that my predecessors were not as transparent. Okay. And so a lot of these things were not brought to the board. One of the things that our charter requires is that we meet quarterly. Since I've been executive director, my board actually meets monthly, so I can provide them with more transparency and let them know the things that are going on. I think the other part is that, in all honesty, in respect to Secretary Oliva, I can say myself, we have not had the appropriate sense of urgency, and I think the 18 months that I've been here has shown that. I will say, not as an excuse, but just as a point of transparency, that when I took the role in April of 23, my entire senior leadership team resigned shortly after that. So I lost my finance team, I lost my academics team, and all of the people who work under them. So I came into an organization I had to learn, and I'm not from the state of Arkansas, so I had to learn the state of Arkansas systems, and I did not have the institutional knowledge of the individuals that were there, because within my first 2 months, except for one person, my entire senior leadership team transitioned out. So I had to learn all the systems and try to archive that stuff from pulling up old emails and pulling up things from, and I will say DESE and APSRC have been extremely supportive, but it was not the ideal situation because it was the worst. It was like I had to learn Arkansas and I had to learn KIPP all simultaneously without the institutional knowledge that comes from having a leadership team of people who have been doing this work. All those people took that knowledge with them, so I had to learn those things from scratch, which delayed me getting the things that needed to be done in place. But that is an excuse, but it is the reality of what I inherited.
Mr. Brown, question.
Just a process question. If a charter school is put on probation, does it automatically go back to the charter authorizing panel for review?
I think it would be helpful if Ms. Horshman, if you don't mind coming up to share a little bit about the probation status and the consequences of it.
So with the probationary status, that would remain in place for a year, and if they do not correct the parameters around which they went into probationary status, then that could lead to further action. And I will defer to Mr. Smith if there's anything regarding charter panel.
And Hope, also before Dr. Smith
Yes, sir.
goes, can you address Dr. Arnold's question on the process, I guess, that you go through for accreditation to go from probation, or what are the next levels? 'Cause he asked the question, is probation firm enough, right? So I think we need to make sure we understand that process.
Yeah, so within the law, you are allowed to put a district on probation for a particular standard, and then again, if there is non-compliance with that standard, there are further actions that can be taken. I would need to review the rules quickly and make sure that I'm not missing something in that, but yeah.
May I ask a question from that, Ms. Horshman? So, or Mr. Sewell, will you all be going back to do another audit of the district soon? What does that timeline look like?
Yes, we'll be on site mid-November to do a full programmatic and financial, we call it monitoring, but audit, same.
Okay. And then another one in the spring, and then I'm just thinking about next school year getting started.
We'll
as
be
well.
there pretty regular.
Okay, so it's not just a one-time?
And we already have scheduled monthly check-ins with the district via Zoom with our dispute officer.
Okay.
So there will be a lot of checks moving forward over the course of the next year.
Okay.
Can I
Mr.
ask if
Sewell?
we can join on those visits as well?
Say that again.
You know, I love a good school visit. Is it appropriate for us to come and, as a board member, to come and visit and take a tour? And
I wouldn't have any issues with that. I'm gonna.
I would just say as long as you're observing, because if it does have to come back to the board, you don't want to have to put yourself in a position where you couldn't vote to take action because you could have participated in a review process. So I think there needs to be a clear delineation of, are you participating in the on-site review or just observing the process? And as long as we can make sure those buckets are very clear, I don't think it's an issue. But if you want a school visit, I'm sure we could schedule a school visit even outside of the review.
That, 'cause I appreciate
just to
that.
be clean.
Yes, I like that because I struggle having not visited and having not walked the halls and seen, the feeling. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Rollins, did you have a question?
Mr. Sewell, I know this goes back to, and I hope you can clarify this for me, this goes back to June of 2023, the first letter from the parent?
That's correct.
The first complaint?
Yep.
How many times have you gone to the KIPP district then to support them and give them help?
So Mr. Boyd mentioned Kimberly Parks with APSRC. Just some of the resources and supports that we provide. We checked in with the district monthly. I'm not sure how often we went on site over the course of the last year, but from an Office of Special Education discretionary grant through IDEA funds, we provide funds to APSRC to support the salary of Ms. Parks and work very closely with her as an extension of the department and APSRC. That is a joint participation that we use to support some of our charter school districts. Our compliance officer had did monthly checks, and they also have a state education advisor that is there to support as well. As far as being on site in the last year, unless Dr. Adams knows of another time we've been on site, this October 2nd was the first time that we've been on site.
Because it really says they didn't give you required documentation to comply with requested actions.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I know, I'm reading it off your sheet here.
Yeah.
You were not given required documentation to comply with requested actions, and yet I'm sitting here thinking, how did that go on for this long?
Well, with a lot of those actions, they have the ones that were specified for September 25th that had a specific date.
Okay.
Those are due by those dates. And so I've got communication logs where we're trying to communicate with them saying these actions have not been completed. Outside of that, IDEA gives the district a calendar year to complete those activities. And so it didn't conclude until
September of this year.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That really clarifies it. Thank you so much.
Ms. Gaynor, did you have a question?
Well, I'm afraid I interrupted, and I wanted to be sure that Mr. Arnold's question was answered as far as the processes.
So I have confirmed. Yep, so once a district is put on accredited probationary status, at any point past that the district is deemed to have violated the standard again, then the board may take further actions, and those do include actions such as requiring a public school to close down or dissolve, annexing, consolidating public schools. So there's a list of actions that the board would be required to take should it be seen that the district did not comply after being put on probationary status for this violation. We would give them actions they must take after the probationary status is put in place, and if they don't comply with that, and this is seen again for this particular standard, then there would be further action from the board.
So I just want to clarify, so any accreditation actions that are put on a school or school district is progressive, and you have to start with putting them on probation and giving them an opportunity to fix it. If they're not able to come to that, then there's an opportunity to come back to the board to go through that progressive process to look at further sanctions. So I think
that is accurate.
To answer the question for today, step one, if the board chooses, would to start that process by putting them on a formal probationary status from our board.
Is there a timeline? Like, can we specify 60 days before we re-review, or do they get a full rest of the year?
The rules do not specify timeline. We are required to provide corrective action steps from the department. And I would defer to our legal if that needs to be in the motion or.
Because my fear is if we put probationary status today through the end of the year, when are kids going to start getting the services they need? That's my big issue, because I have zero faith that they're getting what they need. You can't even tell me how many kids you've assessed yet this year, and that was the whole point of this hearing. So I guess that's mine. And I apologize for directing my frustration at you.
No, it deserves the voting.
Because I know you've been here for only 18 months, but these are basic questions I would have thought you could have answered today, so that's my concern. So can we say like 60 days and then have
I think
re-review?
if you made that in your motion, we would include that in that probationary letter status, and then you could even give us a time that you want to bring this back to the board, right? So you could just say, we want to review the accreditation status in January, but I see Matt's gonna go, because they're gonna be on site in November. We're gonna have a better understanding in the next few weeks of where we are, but we'd be happy to come back and provide updates on that.
And that's what I was gonna mention. We would be happy to come back before this board and share what the monitoring findings were. And if there were any corrective actions from this monitoring that's gonna take place that this board would wanna know about.
And Matt, if it's okay, I think we could be even fair enough to say, we'll bring this back up in December.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, so
Yeah.
like, we can just go ahead and know, I'm not saying to take action on their accreditation status, but to at least provide an update on where we are with the process and making sure these students are getting the attention they deserve.
Absolutely.
So by December, you'll have completed your monitoring situation and have corrective actions for them to follow up? So I'm trying to get, if we said in February we want to re-review this, is that enough time?
February should be, I mean, by February, we would know what the preliminary findings are. And then they have a corrective action window of those preliminary findings that they have time to correct. But we could definitely come back before this board in December, in January, in February, just to give you an update on where we are on the monitoring process and kind of what we've seen from the initial audit of their programs and finances.
Okay. I want to give an opportunity. Ms. Hunter is on Zoom to make sure. Would you have any questions, Ms. Hunter?
No, I don't have any. I don't have any direct questions, but I do want to just express my concerns, which are similar to those that have already been expressed about. I think this is an extremely fragile situation. Frankly, I have a low confidence in the leadership. I also have a low confidence that anything will turn around, to be honest. But I do understand and believe that we need to give the district a chance to make this right. But it's my preference that we give them the shortest amount of time to make things right and get on the right track before we take further action, because I personally believe that what I've heard the last 30 minutes here is, unconscionable and just completely unacceptable.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Board members, additional questions? Mr. Bragg.
One more process question. Are we here because a parent raised this issue? If the parent had not raised an issue, is there something in our system that would have brought this to light? I just need clarification.
That is why we've made the recommendation for you today that has been made because of a complaint investigation that was not concluded within the time frame that it was set to conclude. We felt like a lot of actions were somewhat egregious in nature, specifically that the student did not receive the compensatory education services and that those services were delayed. There was large breaks in those services, and over a year later, the services had still not been completed. So that's why this has been brought to you today. Is it because the parent brought it up? I'm going to say that was the spark that got us to where we are over a year later. And I also wanted to add, a minute ago when I said we could come back before this board in December, we probably will not have a completed audit by that time, but happy to come give you an update on where we are in the audit.
I would just be happy if you want to just send me what you have. I don't want to put extra work on everybody else's plate, but I would be.
I think it would be prudent for our board to model what acting with urgency looks like. And so we will bring this up until this is resolved at every board meeting.
And to Mr. Bragg's point, I want to look further into what systems we can set in place so that these things don't rely on, we should have known before the parent complained. That should be the last fail-safe.
Yeah, to that point, how can we go 20 years without knowing that this charter does not have systems in place to ensure the special education students are getting what they need? That's shocking to me. I think that.
I apologize, Mr. Wood. That's not what I said. I said that as the denominator increased, that was what was going on. The services have been provided. We've worked diligently to make sure. I do want to say that I feel like this situation with this specific case and the related services provider, I want to say was isolated because it was one specific. The services had been provided previously for our students. There was an issue with the related services provider that started in May of this year, and that was why we didn't renew their contract. I
don't want to get into a back and forth argument with you. To the extent that Well, first of all, I have no confidence that services have been provided adequately ever.
Okay.
Based on what we've heard today, I have no reason to believe that. It may be true, but I don't know that. What you did say was that there were not systems in place, and I don't know exactly what you were describing, but I believed it was something along the lines of there were not systems in place to ensure that the individuals employed by KIPP who were responsible for providing this appropriately did what they were supposed to do, or
My understanding was the systems changed with every individual person.
Right.
That is not a system. That
Right.
is one person's way of doing work.
Correct.
And that has been going on for 20 years.
Correct. But we were still providing the services. It just
I'm
wasn't
not
in a way
suggesting
that.
you weren't, but there was
It
a
just
lot of
made it
fails.
difficult that when new people came in,
Mhm.
it was difficult to understand what those systems were because it wasn't an established system that everyone was aware of. That is what I'm trying to articulate, but not saying that services were not provided, not saying that students were not getting what they needed. It was for individuals who weren't directly working with those students, it was difficult to understand what the system was. So for example, I actually have a tracker now, so I can go on the tracker and see what number of hours students are being provided weekly. I can see what the provider is providing for those students. There's a way that I can know that. There's a way that school leaders can know that. That system didn't exist before. They'd have to go to the individual who was responsible for that child's case manager, and ask those questions to get that documentation, as opposed to a dashboard or a tracker where that information was available. That's what I meant about systems.
Well, a lot has been said. I agree with so much of what has been said. My stomach is kind of churning at learning about this type of failure, because so often when we talk about, failure of academic achievement or even growth in various places around Arkansas, we so quickly point to that's a high poverty area, that's a low income area, and we just quickly dismiss and blame, and almost as though we build an excuse that if you're from a high poverty, low income, you can't learn. It's the region's fault.
Correct.
But today highlights that oftentimes it's the provider's fault.
Yeah.
It's the government's fault, and that is disgusting.
It is.
And it can't stand.
It cannot.
It respectfully to KIPP, if your charter was before us, I couldn't vote to extend it. It's better to not be doing it than to be doing it poorly. Let someone else step in and try. I respect that you've only been there 18 months. This is, from what I can tell, this is almost day one for you when this complaint came in. I'll give an ounce of credit to that, and I look forward to the changes you make. I hope you take away from this that while there may not have been urgency at KIPP, there's urgency at the State Board of Education.
Absolutely.
I also believe that this is happening in other places too. I don't think that KIPP is the only place struggling with this type of lack of systems. And they're the ones in front of us today, but I really do think that we have a responsibility to find where this failure is occurring in other places, because too many students aren't learning what they should be learning. And too often we blame it on all the things except the person or the people providing the education. And I think today highlights that there's a good chance that it's the people providing the education that are letting our kids down.
I'm also surprised that the board isn't here. Ironically enough, the board chair is the Quality Systems Director at Nucor Steel. That could be a great resource for you. You also have a Director of Student Support Services as a board member. I'd like to see them here perhaps in the future.
More questions or comments, board members? Okay. The floor will then be open for a motion. The recommendation is to place KIPP Delta in probation status.
I'll make that motion, but should we add in that we want a follow-up report in December? And then, or just monthly thereafter until?
You can make the motion.
Okay. I think for me, we could motion to put him on probationary status, and I want an update in December on what you found, or even just an email to me is fine. And then I want to reevaluate in December how much longer we extend their probationary status before we discuss the next step.
Okay, so there's a motion to place KIPP Delta on probation status with a reevaluation,
30
a
days.
report and a reevaluation in December. Is there a second to the
Second.
motion? A second by Dr. Arnold. Questions or comments before a vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. With that, let's take a 5-minute break before we enter in our next hearing. Oh, really? And so we don't have any of the people here? Just the two superintendents? We have the two superintendents here, yeah. We didn't get any emails about it either. Okay, thank you. I'm always called them. And here. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get back started here. No, last meeting we were. I know, that was great. You put the fans on and then I was cold again. But I was feeling good last week. Okay. Thank you, board members. We are going to get back started on item number 4, consideration of a boundary change by the Prairie Grove School District. We have Mr. Schultz here to present to us to begin.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. This is a matter which came before you. A petition was filed by the Prairie Grove School District to alter its boundary, which is something state law allows, and they're submitting a request to you. It was heard by you originally in June, and you had determined that the district should work together and see if they can come to a resolution. That they have attempted to do that. It took some time because one board would need to meet, the other board would need to consider their ideas, so it was kind of a multi-month process. Ultimately, the districts have determined that they're not going to be able to come to any sort of collaborative agreement and would simply ask that the board decide the question, and your options are essentially to approve Prairie Grove's petition to alter their boundary, to approve some alteration that's separate for them, or deny the petition, in which case those boundaries would remain the same as they are right now. I know both superintendents are available to answer any questions, as am I, and turn it over to you.
Can I just make sure that, for clarification, we understand, the petition, if the board approves it, would allow the rezoning to take place. If they don't approve the petition, then the boundaries stay as they're currently.
That's correct, and rezoning being that about 18 residents will be moved from Lincoln into Prairie Grove.
Do we have any procedures as far as districts presenting?
They had presented in June. My understanding, based on communication with the district, is they're content to allow that presentation to rest with you if that's acceptable to you, but they're available if you have any concerns or questions.
Okay. Dr. Campbell and Dr. Spears, I appreciate you all coming down today. I know it's a drive, so thank you for coming. It's good to see you off Zoom as well. So with that, we'll open the floor up to questions, and our board members will be able to pull you all up as needed.
Thank you.
Thank you. To my left, questions, Ms. Rollins?
Not right now. I do have some questions. And I think they would be to the petitioners, the folks requesting the change. I'll start by saying that I am open to changing school district boundaries. Having said that, I believe that there needs to be significant evidence that a majority of the individuals in the affected area agree with the movement. And what we have is a petition signed by, I think, less than 30 people. And so I would like to know, how many residents are there in the affected area?
There's about 18 residents.
18
homes.
There's only 18 homes, so there's only 30?
So yes.
How many people live in those 18
I would
homes?
say roughly 30 people up on the mountain of Kelly Mountain.
So you would tell us that close to everyone who lives in the affected zone change, in the affected geographic area that is being proposed to move, has signed the petition?
I would not say that on record that everyone has signed the petition.
No, I didn't say
but
everyone,
but I'm just saying
almost, or whatever, more than 50%.
It's a high volume of people that live on Kelly Mountain. Yes, sir.
Well, this isn't a question really. It is a frustration in the process. Like I said, I agree that people should be able to move. I don't believe that the geography of our school districts should be set in stone for hundreds of years. I think that people should be able to petition and move to a different district if they agree. I believe this is the process that state law outlines. I wish that there was one more step in the process that required that this question be on a ballot for the people in the affected area. And while I wish that was the case, that's not currently state law. I do think that that might be a proposal that the legislature could consider soon, so that they could add that as one more step before it comes to the state board, so that we would have the information that, okay, here are the results of an election in this neighborhood, and more than 50% of them voted to move, so that would be an important data point. Now, right now we have informal data, but I guess it's better than nothing. And it sounds like a decent majority of the folks who live in the area wish to move. Okay. I guess I don't have any more questions at this point.
Ms. Skeeter, questions? Dr. Arnold? Mr. Bragg? Mr. Henderson?
I do have a comment and a question. And Jeff, I can give you some context. So I'm from Bentonville, and I have driven down to Prairie Grove because it's like 40 minutes just to see the area that we're talking about. And I guess my concern, if you're from Northwest Arkansas, you realize that this just sets a really bad precedent for every time somebody, for example, I live in Bentonville. I'm actually closer to Pea Ridge Public Schools than I am to the school that I'm zoned for. So why don't I just petition to move my boundary so that I'm now in Pea Ridge? I can school choice, that's already an available option. And so I guess I just really, really struggle, especially with, everything that we have before us, to say, why do 18 people get to decide where their boundary is without an overarching reason, just because they want to go to another district? And I think both districts are fine. I'm not sitting here suggesting that. Being from Northwest Arkansas, I just feel like this just opens the Pandora's box of saying, well, I don't want to be in this district, so I'm just going to petition to make the change when we have school choice. I don't feel like we've been given a good enough reason, in my opinion, to merit this.
Ms. Hunter, questions?
Yes, thank you. So, Ms. Woods, I happen to agree with you. I've not heard any compelling reason, and with school choice, I think that really kind of is a game changer with respect to stated school boundaries. But just curious, why did the talks break down? I mean, and I think that at maybe at the first hearing, there was some conversation about Prairie Grove offering transportation for those students. Can you just kind of update us on what has transpired?
Yes, ma'am. My first experience with the board, I gleaned that it would be difficult to change boundaries based on a couple of comments. So we went back to the school district and talked about a memorandum of understanding, 20-year agreement, that anyone that lived on Kelly Mountain, they would be able to go to Lincoln School District or Prairie Grove School District. They didn't have to sign any more paperwork. That was the agreement, because we figured that the board would not support boundary changes. And that was rejected by Lincoln, and rightfully so. That's what they wanted to do. The Prairie Grove School District supported that. And then you want to talk about your side?
So I had actually had a patron of ours that has school choice to us, who bought a farm right on the edge of Lincoln and Prairie Grove, right on the boundary, like right across the street is Lincoln. And she had asked me that over a year ago about a boundary change then, and I'm like, that just doesn't happen. And my thought, it was always like, had to be an agreement. We had to both agree before you would take that up. So I kind of dismissed that, and then when this was all making the paper, she approached me again, because she's really involved in our school and PTA and all of that. She approached me again. She goes, this looks like it's going to happen for them. What about us? So I actually met with him and his board president, our board president, and we talked about kind of like a land swap. And that actually made the paper last week, our little land swap option. But his board denied that. So we've kind of been back and forth. But I do want to quote that one of his board members said that they thought a land swap would set a bad precedent for the state, because other districts would follow suit and want to do that as well. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I also think changing boundaries is a bad precedent, because I mean, lots of school districts around the state Pea Ridge and Bentonville's a big one. Fayetteville and Elkins is a huge one. There are lots of neighborhoods that are Fayetteville School District, and those kids are choicing over to Elkins, and they would like to have those boundaries changed. I think you will see an influx of boundary change requests if you do approve this today. Thank you.
Can you just speak really quickly? Ms. Hunter asked about the transportation to just make
Right.
sure, like, are the students and families being served in the
Oh,
school that they want?
absolutely.
Like, can you just verify that or clarify
Yes,
that?
so we border Prairie Grove School District, Siloam to the north, and Cedarville to the south. And I have students that have choice or board-to-board transferred to us and have been going to us for multiple years. And we go into those districts and pick those students up, and vice versa. I see a Siloam bus as I drive into work. A Siloam bus is coming out of part of my district to pick up kids that have choice to Siloam or transferred. And Prairie Grove, I go into Prairie Grove, he's going in, he's providing transportation for those students. So those students are being served, and they do have, because our laws have allowed school choice and board-to-board transfers. So kids are getting to go where they want. I think we'll get kind of muddy if we start changing up boundaries, so.
Thank you. Ms. Hunter, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rollins
No,
had a
I
question.
just appreciate your comments, Ms. Spears. I'm not a proponent as well of changing boundaries. I do think it'll cause a lot of headaches for us and for other communities. I think with school choice and school transfers, that really fits the need, so.
Ms. Keener.
So this is maybe a question for legal, but the, it says that there was a petition filed. Who was that filed with? Or who?
With the AD.
Okay, so is there,
They petitioned you.
so did okay. Did one of us, verify the addresses and the residents, or that this is a legit, right?
Yes, so
The way the Secretary of
again,
State
this
would do?
was done in the spring, but when we received it, we did review the petition and found it to satisfy the legal requirements to come before you when we put it on your agenda.
Mr. Wood, did you have questions?
No, not right now, no.
Right. Further questions or comments?
I was gonna ask, did I read somewhere that it's like $10,000 or $12,000 is what we're talking about? Yes? Yeah.
I heard similarly.
Okay, I just can't remember. So we're talking about $10,000, $12,000 in property taxes and local millage, okay.
And I want to clarify, Dr. Campbell, is Prairie Grove picking up students that are choicing into your district on this road?
Yes, for Kelly Mountain, yes, ma'am, but we do not pick up kids outside of our district typically, but we are doing it for the kids on Kelly Mountain.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And it is meeting their needs at this point in time?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay. I had expected maybe some of the families, I know it's a burden to travel here, but at least to submit information before our hearing today. Did you hear from any of them?
Yes, ma'am, they were at our last board meeting, and they had
Okay.
requested that the board at least allow the state board to make the decision, and they would be comfortable with whatever decision was made.
Okay. I know it's a large burden to come here, so I didn't expect them to all come here, but at least any more communication. Okay. Any more questions, comments, board members? Okay, so.
I guess I'll make a comment, just out of fear that I think that if I were to make a motion to approve the petition, I probably won't even get a second. So I'll make a comment before I fail to get a second. I hope that board members would not be so hardened against boundary changes that we would never allow one. I would challenge everyone to consider when would you allow one? If everyone that lives in a geographic area wants to move to a different school district, why would we say no? Does it set a bad precedent? Maybe, but we're talking about government here, and the people have a right to associate with whichever government they want to associate with. We're talking about taxation and representation, and fundamentally, that these people pay taxes, that when their student choices to a different school district, money does follow that student to the receiving school district. But the property taxes go to a different school district. And if you don't have children, your money still goes to different school districts. When your child is in a school district that you don't live in their district, you have no representation. You have no school board member to go speak to about changes you would like to see in the schools. You like that school better, but you don't get to affect, you have no vote to cast to affect the policies of the schools that you're sending your kids to. I realize the response might be, well, then just don't send your kids there. But so there could be fundamental reasons why communities want to change. And I hope that when the legislature sets out a process, the legislature didn't say, no one shall ever change boundaries. The legislature said, if you want to change boundaries, here's the process to go through to do that. And the final step is state board approval. I hope that we don't step into a role of super legislature and say, no, we will never allow that. So as we deny this petition, it seems like, I hope that just in future, as people want to change the government that governs their schools, their children's schools, I hope that we will allow a place that we could be convinced that enough people want it, or want it for the right reasons or whatever, and would not just cut it off as a fundamental, no, that creates too much chaos. So anyway, that's my comment. With that, I'll make a motion to approve the petition to change the boundary.
There's a motion by Mr. Wood to approve the petition to change the boundary of the Prairie Grove and Lincoln School Districts. Is there a second?
Which is why I made my comment.
So motion.
I've been around Robert's rules a minute or two.
Motion fails without a second. Back to the floor. Is there a motion on the consideration of boundary change for the Lincoln and Prairie Grove school districts?
I'll make the motion then to deny the change petition by the Prairie Grove School District.
There's a motion by Ms. Rollins to deny the petition. Is there a second?
A second.
There's a second by Mr. Bragg. Questions or comments before a vote is taken?
Just one comment about a group of people wanting to vote on moving into another district. If the millages are the same, their taxes may not be affected at all. But the effect on a school district that loses that area could be. Now this is a relatively small area, but if it's a large area, it could have a significant financial impact on the school district. That's just a comment.
So there's a motion on the floor to deny the petition. There's a second to it. Any more questions or comments? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion passes to deny the petition. Thank you, Dr. Campbell and Dr. Spears, for driving down far today. We appreciate you. With that, we will move to item number 5, a number of rules that are to be up for public comment. We have Ms. Alice Ford presenting.
Where's our fearless leader?
Good morning, Courtney Salas Ford. Yes, as you all know, many of you know, Miss Smith is out this week, so you're stuck with the second string. But I'll try to be at least as descriptive, if not as entertaining as Stacy always is. Oh, she knows. Hopefully, she might be watching. She might be watching. So we do have 4 rules for you that are going to be going out for public comment. As you all know, you approve them to go out for public comment. They go out for 30 days so that we can get comments from the public, make any changes as necessary before we make final approval. The first rules up are governing grading and course credit. As you all have heard us talk about many times, we are making changes to make sure that students have as many opportunities for acceleration as possible, and that we are focusing on some of those. And so specifically, we have added into the rules the Cambridge Advanced International Certificate of Education, otherwise known as ACE, as an opportunity for advancement, for acceleration. There are also some added criteria for students to receive weighted credit for a CTE course within one of the career and technical pathways that has been identified. And as the result of a legislative change, we have added computer science related CTE courses as an option for students to take to meet their computer science requirement. There's also a lot of cleanup, and so if it looks like there's a lot of changes in there, some of that is just changing numbering and the way things are worded, but those were pretty much the big major changes. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and if I can't, then we have lots of experts behind me that can.
And I just want to clarify that if we approve the draft language, this is to go out for public comment. So this isn't recommending final form. This is just for us to take this draft out and receive feedback from its first round.
That is correct.
Okay. Board members, questions on the grading and course credit rules? Mr. Rollins? Mr. To my left. Mr. Rollins? Okay, to my right. Ms. Hunter, questions on this first set of rules?
No.
I do have a question. One issue in the state that reoccurs is the cost for concurrent credit courses. I think there's just cleanup language around that in here. Have there been any substantial changes to those policies?
Do you want to?
So, unrelated to this rule, and hopefully something that we can talk about, like Mr. Wood talks about, maybe there's some considerations with the legislator for upcoming session. Standardizing weighted credit, a common course code catalog system for concurrent credit, unifying concurrent credit, all needs to be addressed because it's different, completely different depending on the district you attend, and how they handle these requests is not uniform or coordinated. And I think it would behoove our state to start looking at, as we're looking at pushing more and more accelerated pathways for students, standardizing this process. So I agree with you, Dr. Moore. There's a lot of confusion on the practices that are being implemented. This rule is going to help start coordinating that, but there are also some things that I think need to be addressed or reviewed legislatively that will help streamline this process as well.
Okay. That's good news to hear. I know there's a lot on y'all's plate, but I'm glad you're looking at that because it is long overdue.
Yeah, and if I'll add, probably in the next month or two, you'll see the course choice rules. That was a result of LEARN's putting in the course choice program, and a lot of that, the surrounding issues with concurrent credit will be addressed through those as well.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions on this first set of rules? Okay. I think, should we take a vote on each one or go through?
They're listed separately, so I think it would make sense to do that.
Okay. So if no further questions or comments, floor will be open to release for public comment the rules governing grading and course credit.
I'll move to release for public comment.
There's a motion by Ms. Woods to release the rules governing grading and course credit for public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Ms. Keener. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, the next rules are governing distance and digital learning. Again, a lot of cleanup with these, but some of the big changes were that we added requirements to align with course choice, as I just talked about a minute ago. You'll be seeing that come up in a lot of our rules to ensure alignment. We also removed the requirement that each high school student take at least one digital learning course to graduate. That was the result of a repeal in legislation. And also legislative repeal of the requirement that school districts and charter schools offer digital learning courses to students when they are expelled. Again, I think you're just seeing a lot of cleanup in these and those legislative changes in alignment with course choice.
Yeah. Board members, questions?
What is a digital learning course?
A digital learning course is essentially students are accessing their coursework through a digital format. So the online schools, online classes.
Like Canvas and Schoology, things like that. So are they, excuse me, asynchronous or synchronous?
If I understand correctly, distance learning is synchronous. Digital learning can be synchronous or asynchronous.
There was a requirement that you had to take at least one course through that medium?
Yes, there was in law up until once COVID happened and kind of all schools started offering digital courses, then the last legislative session that was taken out of law.
That's fascinating.
I think it was like a decade and a half ago, and it was that you wanted to get students prepared to take virtual courses before they went to college and likely had one.
And to show them what a computer was.
Right.
Computer.
We rolled in the cart with the
Oh, Lord.
Okay, so additional questions on the distance and digital learning rules? To my left. Okay, I have two questions. One is on the portion about students that are expelled. Was this a law change?
It was.
Okay, so if a student expelled, it means they are no longer, can they still enroll in a virtual school, or it's just that they're no longer?
They still can, and the school district from which they were expelled can still choose to offer them. They just no longer have that right to, or the school district doesn't have the requirement to offer them that, how they did previously.
Okay, so
my hope is that we would, students make mistakes. They violate the code of conduct. There are some egregious events where it would require an expulsion of a student, but I would hope, even if they're expelled, they would still have access to services in some form or manner. The worst thing we can do is put a kid out there without any services and have them give up hope that they'll ever be able to achieve at least a standard high school diploma. So while that requirement may not be in place, I feel like in good faith, most of our districts understand that these are sensitive areas for students and will provide some kind of service in some alternative format because they don't want to lose connections with students.
Okay. My other question is in regard to class size. I don't see it in these rules, but at some point when we were going through the process of virtual schools during COVID, there was some rules stating that if it was a digital course, there was no class size requirement. Do you know about that and where that would come from?
I don't. We do have rules that are specific to class size and teaching load, so there may be something in there. But without those rules in front of me, I couldn't say
but
specifically.
It's not in this, but I
No,
think
it's
the
not in
concern was that the digital, those that are teaching virtual courses could have unlimited number of students.
If there is a requirement in the class size and teaching load, they would still be bound by that. But I can look that up for you and let you know.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hunter, any questions?
No, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments, board members? And then the floor will be open for a motion to release for public comment the rules governing distance learning and digital learning.
I'll make that motion that we release them for public comment.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Bragg to release the rules for public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or comments? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes.
The next rules are governing the First Connections program under Part C of IDEA. And I actually am going to turn this over to Board Member Keener to give you guys a little bit of information about the First Connections program. Since this is her area of expertise, we asked her to take the floor and educate you guys a little bit about these and the changes that were made.
Thank you, and my apologies that this fell on me to you guys. Okay, so this covers Part C under IDEA, which is for children ages birth to 3. The bottom line here is that the federal government, it is a federal grant program, that early intervention is truly seen as prevention for later issues, that during this time of rapid brain development, that if a child falls slightly behind in development, we can catch it and address it, and it will, during this particular time, K through 3, it reduces the need and the cost for special ed later down the road. It is designed to maximize the potential. There are two big pieces here that I love about this, and first and foremost is this really values the family as not just a partner in the child's education and development, but as the expert in the child's education and development. So evaluations are done with the primary caregiver in place. The parent can pull consent at any time, those types of things. And then secondly, it is designed to be, the therapy, the services are designed to be done in the natural environment. So we know that speech and language pathology, occupational therapy, if they're not done in the child's natural environment, it doesn't necessarily translate. We're seeing that more and more in pre-K and K, so I loved seeing that in this piece. And that's about it. If there are any questions, I'm not sure I can answer them, but I'll do my best.
Is it up to the parent to know that this is available, or is there some other way of
mechanism?
enrolling?
So that is a good question. There are, basically anybody can refer a child. Typically it's done, the hospital, the pediatrician, the child care, but I myself as a parent made that referral for a child, for one of my twins, and so it's open to anyone. And then there's a timeline for evaluation and parent meetings and things like that. So
Thank you, Ms. Keener. Questions, board members to my left?
Personal comment. My granddaughter in another state was identified and had intervention during this time frame, so I'm so grateful.
And I'm not sure if this is clear, but it's at no cost to the family, which was wonderful, I'm sure, for your and for us, because it makes it a no-brainer, right? You don't want to have to consider cost when you're working, when you're worried about development of your child, so it's a benefit. Great program.
Questions, board members to my right?
I have,
Mr. Anderson?
along with the same lines of Ken, I know, does the school have a responsibility, or is there a process of communicating this information to the parents? Because I know, like I said, I know it's available, but I guess one thing I would think of is if it's not presented or marketed in the right way, parents just won't know about it.
Well, you're absolutely right. And so there's two pieces of that. First and foremost, as a former teacher in first grade, often things would arise, and the conversation was a very delicate one with the family, because you want them to be receptive, not see it as labeling, not see it as an accusation that they've done something wrong, that it really is a benefit to address things early on. So that conversation is delicate. But also, throughout this entire lengthy rule, the parents are included in every piece. They can remove consent at any point, but also there are requirements for them to be present at meetings, of course, that they can be in the evaluation, things like that. So the parents are first and foremost seen and displayed in this role as the expert on their child.
Yeah, and since we're talking about children, birth to 3, I think a lot of the times it does fall on the parents or hospitals or doctors to make that information available. This traditional K-12 school districts aren't going to know who those children are necessarily until they do get into the early childhood system around age 3. But if they are a federally, if there's an entity that receives federal funds, I believe, and I'm looking for confirmation, they are required to make that information known to the parents in that facility.
Thank you.
Let me just add to that, because I think you bring up a good point, is if you have a parent and they don't know what to look for, right? Or they don't have, sometimes we compare our own kids to what the other kid was doing at a certain age. You got a lot of new families, a lot of new moms. Hopefully they're going to their doctors, they're getting their checkup, they're doing prenatal care, postnatal care, and they're able to get access to this type of information. Because school districts may or may not know who these families are, right? So I think, to your point, that communication plan is something that we may need to elevate and see how we can always do a better job with communication. I think as one of the exciting things with LEARNS is, as we've established those local leads and we're now being reflected in all 75 counties, this is something that we need to bring to them to say, do a needs assessment and find out how are you communicating with families, how are you making sure they know what's the developmentally appropriate stages that they should be looking for, and if they're not, who do you call and what do you do and why and what is that next step? So I think that's a point well made, and I think for us as we're looking at this next steps would really to put another charge on the local leads to help us kind of get a snapshot of what are we doing and how can we support them.
And as a part of this, should the child not, should the interventions be successful in the 6 to 9 months or whatever it is, that's one path to kind of graduate out. But if they're not, and if the child turns 3, there is a path in here to notify the local education agency so that they can take over. I think, and again, to your point, that bringing this under the Department of Ed is the first step in allowing this to be seen as a crucial piece of education, that birth to 3 is the time to address these things. So I appreciate that and learned.
I just wanted to briefly share, talking about communication plans, since this program has come under the Office of Special Education, transitioning from DHS, they've made a lot of efforts to, whether it was at the state fair, at LEA Academy, on monthly calls with school personnel, to make sure that our schools do understand that this birth to 3 program does exist. So that will also help educate our school personnel that when they are meeting with families, if they do recognize or they see a parent in need of information, they would have that to share also. And also kind of part of those child find activities. A lot of publications put out there, libraries, doctors' offices, newspapers. So really trying hard to recognize the need to get the information out.
May I have a further question with that? So once a student turns 3, they're no longer eligible for this money. Is there other monies that they're available for those related services?
Yes, school age services. Well, schools are responsible for services ages 3 to 21.
Okay.
That all falls under Part B.
Okay.
611 is your school age. Part 619 is considered early childhood, 3 to 5.
Okay.
And so when those referrals at age 3 are made to school districts, or a child could transition from Part C to Part B, and that's what Ms. Keener was just talking about a minute.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Hunter, do you have questions at this point?
I do not, thank you.
Board members, any additional questions or comments? Ms. Keener, anything else you want to add?
I hope you'll release it for public comment. Thank you. Trying to channel my inner Stacy.
With that, then the floor will be open to release the rules governing the First Connections program for public comment.
I make a motion that we release these rules for public comment.
There's a motion by Ms. Keener to release the rules for public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Dr. Arnold. Questions or comments? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have the rules governing special education.
Yes, and so this is section 18 of the special education rules, which governs residential placement of students with disabilities. 2 just minor changes. One is a requirement, it adds requirements that must be met to pay for educational and related costs for students with disabilities placed in an out-of-state residential or inpatient facility. These were legislative changes made in the last session, so they are now reflected in our rules. Also added some notification requirements for students that are placed in juvenile detention facilities, that they notify the school district where the facility is so that they can be aware of that student's need for an education within 5 days of being released. The rest of it is all just cleanup, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Board members to my left, questions? Ms. Rollins? Mr. Wynn? Ms. Keener, Dr. Arnold? Okay. To my right, Mr. Bragg?
How does the, if they're sent to a detention facility, are they still considered enrolled in the local school? Or is that funding affected?
I'm going to have Matt Sewell come up and address that question.
So most of these students are parentally placed into this private facility. The Ask your question again, because I want to make sure I don't get
Is
too
the-
off track here.
Is the foundation funding affected when they move to a detention facility?
No, it's not, because that is a separate payment process. The students are put on the roll of the school district. They are marked as resident X. They do not generate ADM for the school. Did you say this is JDC or residential?
No, I think he was asking about JDC.
Okay, with JDC or residential, they get $60 a day. With JDC, it's $60 a day per bed, and it's a flat rate. Superintendent certifies the students who are in the facility. That's submitted to us. We process all those payments. With residential facilities, it's $60 a day per bed if the student is in it. And so, again, resident X, no ADM generated.
Additional comments, questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Hunters.
And this is just a point of clarity and education for me. So in the definition section, it says that juveniles are a person who's 18 years old or younger. And I guess I was always working on the premise that
I'm not sure I heard all of the question, but
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I think you got the question. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think I heard juvenile and 18 years, so that's in reference to the juvenile detention facilities because they only house students or children 18 and under. If they were above 18, then they would go to an adult correction facility.
Yeah. So actually, my question was, I was always under the understanding that juveniles were under 18. So this is 18 or younger. So is there just a difference in definition, or have I just always been uninformed?
I'm not entirely sure on that. I'll look at it and we can probably get that answer for you before you give final approval to the rules.
Thank you.
Including 18-year-olds, yeah. Ms. Hunter, any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, board members, questions or comments? Okay, the floor will be open for a motion to approve the rules for public comment.
Run a motion to approve the rules for public comments.
Thank you. A motion by Mr. Henderson to approve the rules governing special education for public comment. Is there a second?
A second.
A second by Mr. Bragg. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
And Courtney, just because we do have a new board member, these rules go up for a 30-day public comment period, and then when do they come back to us after that?
So depending on when that 30 days, once we publish notification in the newspaper, that's when the 30 days starts. And so after that 30 days, in which we will also hold a public hearing, legal will review all of the comments, determine if any changes need to be made. If no changes are made, then the rules will come back to you at the next meeting. So probably not December for these, more likely January. And then after that, they go to Legislative Council for review. If we receive sufficient comments that we determine changes are necessary, then we have to put them back out for another 30-day public comment. And so it'll be a little bit longer before they come back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. With that, that concludes our action agenda unless there's any new business. Is there any new business to be brought before our board? We will move on to the consent agenda then. We have already heard that consent agenda item 6, which is a PLSB case, has been pulled by that individual. So that needs to be pulled off the consent agenda. Are there any items that board members want to pull or ask questions on the consent agenda?
I'd like us to look at item number 13.
Okay. Item number 13, would you like it pulled to have a hearing with the educator, or do you want to ask Ms. James some questions right now?
Ms. James, I was surprised about this one because to me the violation in our what
Yes,
do I
ma'am.
want to call it?
Yes.
In our
Yeah.
matrix really had talked about this offense being a revocation, and that did not happen with the PLSB board.
Yes, ma'am, and because it's still confidential, I can't really answer any specific questions while at this meeting, but if you would like to pull it and give rationale, we can certainly do that.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and pull that one then, please?
And this is one that did not have an evidentiary hearing, so we should be able to get it on next month's agenda.
Yeah, and it was a different type of sanction because they didn't have a license yet.
Okay.
Okay, so number 13, board members, any other questions on PLSB cases?
What is the rationale for that one, for pulling that one, just so I'm clear?
The sanction to me did not match the violation.
The matrix, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Any other PLSB? And then there are the 3 charter decisions on our agenda as well. Any questions or comments? Okay, then we will open up the floor for a motion. We have item number 6 and number 13 that have been pulled.
I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda, less item 6 and 13.
Okay, there's a motion by Ms. Rollins to approve the consent agenda without items 6 and 13.
I'll second.
There's a second by Ms. Woods. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. I will say that I was remiss when I got so excited that we have a full board at 9 members. We don't have Bo here today. Because we do have 10 members on our board. It's 11. We're two ex officio members on our board. And I know he told me that he'll have an even more robust report to give us here in December. So, yeah. And when he comes back in December. So with that, we've ended our consent agenda. Any reports by board members? Anything of note this past month that anyone wants to share?
Just really quickly, we had a school readiness summit last week, and Secretary Leva was able to come by, and it was a wonderful chance to elevate our local leads as sort of an extension of the Department of Ed and representing their area in early childhood. So we were excited to share all the things that are happening and engage with the Head Start folks and the Imagination Library folks. Ms. Jackie Govan did a fabulous job putting it together, and look forward to more opportunities like that. Thanks.
Any other board members' reports? Thank you, Ms. Keener, for your work and in-depth knowledge in that space. Okay, then we will move to the commissioner's report.
So I'll just make a few brief comments. First, I want to welcome Dr. Arnold to the team. Dr. Arnold's been a partner, I think, with our agency as we've been doing LEARN's implementation from day one. He's been a volunteer as a practitioner in school choice and has served on committees, and I guess in his new role and his professional career is transformed or just transitioning and is now able to serve in the capacity of being a state board. He's going to be a wealth of resource, a great perspective, and somebody I think I know our agency is going to lean on often, and we're just so excited to have you here. Very, very happy to hear about that.
I'm equally as excited. And now I'll need to take a class on bonds.
Yes, no pressure. A couple kind of neat things that we're able to participate. I know we have a lot of the school districts that are under our purview and control that Sheila often does updates on, but since our last meeting, we actually were able to participate in 2 kind of ribbon cutting ceremonies of some special events that have happened through the support of the school improvement office, and over in Helena, West Helena, we were able to do a ribbon cutting at an outdoor wellness center that is really neat, that they have an active learning space outside, and then a place for children to engage in some fitness. It's like almost like a little fitness course at an elementary school that had nothing, that didn't even have a playground, right? Like, so when you talk about just like a big deal, and to see the students' faces light up to go engage in an active learning space, in a wellness space was truly remarkable, because they were so excited to have something other than just a grassy field to participate in. So another kind of neat thing that we did that I actually think is really innovative, on behalf of the Lee County Superintendent, who's always looking to recruit and retain high quality teachers, is they built 4 duplexes on some school property that they own, and they're going to offer low cost or low rent for teacher recruits that are come in that need to get a foot up. And I want to say over half of them were already filled when we did the ribbon cutting, and he was able to attract staff all the way out in Lee County and Marion. There was folks that were driving from North Little Rock every day to be a part of his team, because they believe in the work they're doing there and want to be part of that mission, and to have an opportunity now to not have to make over an hour and a half drive each and every single day, and have affording housing available to them is really neat. And so the next time we're in those areas, if you ever want to pop in and see some pretty special things, I think it's well worth the endeavor. Ms. Keener talked a little bit about meeting with the local leads. So if you remember, since our last meeting, this is exciting, because it's been a competitive process to be identified as a local lead or an expert in early learning within your region and community. And we started with cohort 1, and then eventually added cohort 2. And it was about a week or so ago, we actually met with the new members of cohort 3. We have all 3 cohorts filled, and all 75 counties in this state have an early local lead representation. This is going to be a game changer. When we talked a little bit about that birth to 3 space. We talked about voluntary pre-K, early learning, high quality access. This is going to make sure that when students come to us in K-12, they're ready to learn. And when we look at measuring kindergarten readiness and making sure that students are ready to hit the ground day 1, it's the folks that are going to be these local leads that are going to be providing high quality professional development, gaining resources, making sure that there's a presence, getting us data, right? Like, this is a big deal. We talk a lot about LEARNs, but reimagining early learning, that whole section in LEARNs, by putting this in one space to say, we're gonna create not only a local lead support network, but we're gonna create one dashboard, one framework that everybody's gonna work in. And in fact, as we've gone through this transition, we inherited a lot of different dashboards. So if you ask the state who participated in early learning, we couldn't tell you, because there were so many different organizations that use their own systems, and none of them talk to each other. So one of the biggest tasks that we gave to Regent and the IT team is to create a solution to do that. And we're about to roll out, I don't know if it's this month or next month, but in the next couple months, that platform, that will be one platform for all of early learning, that's going to keep track of a student identifier, so we can see where students went through in the system. It's going to keep track of payments. It's going to keep track of enrollment. This is a big deal. And so when you think about things that don't get a lot of attention, and we all know Regent and how humble and kind of behind the scenes he is. Like, when he was like, yeah, that was a heavy lift. If Regent's saying that was a heavy lift, that was a heavy lift. So if you see him, you got to thank him and congratulate him, because getting this unified and coordinated under one umbrella is something we're really excited to be rolling out. And Ms. Keener's been just a valuable asset for giving us feedback along the way and helping to make sure we do that. Other kind of things I want to put on your radar is, I think most of you know, Sessions getting ready to come up, starting here in January. So our agencies has been actively engaged in work. On Tuesday of next week, we're presenting our department's budget to the legislature. So if you're bored and want to tune in or attend, I'd be happy to have you come sit up there with me. It's always a good time.
Entertaining.
A couple other just kind of side updates as we're looking at supporting all of the entities that we oversee. Most of you know we've been engaged with kind of providing additional layers of support for the School of the Deaf and Blind in reimagining that learning space. So we're really excited that we've gone through the process where the architects are getting plans drawn to the point where we're able to put out a bid to find a contractor that is going to start building those plans, and that bid process has been complete, and we're on track to start beginning site prep for a new state-of-the-art facility as early as next month. So making sure some of the most vulnerable students under kind of our state purview is getting access to high-quality learning environment that they deserve and need. It's really exciting to start seeing that process is moving forward, and it's just little pieces of progress along the way that there's so many different initiatives. And another initiative that we're working on is we did decide to do a transition for the vendor that's making the educational freedom account payments and overseeing that process. So that transition is ongoing and should be complete over the holidays, and we'll be working with a new vendor here in January that we think are going to be providing even better deliverables for our families and for us here at the state. So I say all that is sometimes there's a lot of things that we're working on that come to the board, but then there's a lot of things that don't come to the board but that are big deals and deserve for us to take a moment to reflect and thank the team out there that's making it happen. And any chance I can get to publicly thank the leadership team and the staff at our agency for always going above and beyond and exceeding our expectations. We want to do that, and when we were able to recognize our veteran staff this morning, it was almost a little emotional to see our staff that constantly is a servant leader, and they're always looking to serve and give back. So I'm really just proud to continue in this work with you.
Awesome. With that, are there any questions or comments from the Secretary? And do we have anyone sign up for public comment today? Okay, no public comment. Well, with that, we're done. If any.
Where are my friends from Pine Bluff? we do a check on them. We get someone to go wellness check.
Well, with no further questions or comments, we will conclude our November board meeting. Thank you, and thank you all again, agency, for your work, and especially for our veterans here in this agency. So thank you.
Y'all have a good day. Thank you.